Out of fraud, no action arises. This phrase echoes significantly when we consider the 2020 election. Despite repeated claims by the media that there is no evidence of fraud,
loyal allies also saying there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud. U.S. Attorney General William Barr says the Justice Department has not uncovered any evidence that would change the outcome of the presidential election.
Attorney General William Barr publicly broke from the president on Tuesday, saying there has been no evidence of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election.
And the Justice Department has just found no evidence of widespread fraud that would change the outcome of the election.
We have some breaking news. The Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, has just debunked President Trump's claims of widespread election fraud. In an interview with the Associated Press, he said, quote, "To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election."
The reality we explore suggests there is no evidence that Joe Biden won. Let's look at the numbers. Hundreds of thousands of votes were altered or not lawfully cast. On election night, Donald Trump was leading in all swing states. In Georgia, Trump was up by 12 points with over 335,000 votes, at 56% of the vote counted at 10 to 17 p.m. In Wisconsin, he was ahead by 5 points and 121,280 votes at 12:12 a.m. In Pennsylvania, by 15 points and 659,145 votes at 12:38 a.m. In Michigan, by 10 points and 293,052 votes. However, precincts in Atlanta, Detroit, Pennsylvania, Phoenix, and Milwaukee continued counting until the results reached the desired outcome, which was opposite the will of the voters. In Georgia, the vote count went from 4.7 million, already a record for the state, to almost 5 million, which is 300,000 more votes than what top election officials claimed were cast. The elections in these swing states were riddled with constitutional violations, unlawful ballots, widespread broken chains of custody, electronic manipulation, and missing and corrupted election files, making them uncertifiable. Additionally, Republican poll watchers were denied access to counting in multiple jurisdictions, and ballots were counted in secret in the middle of the night. Reports have surfaced of ineligible voters, voting machine anomalies, water main breaks, improbable percentages of ballots for Biden, and more. Investigations have uncovered an avalanche of irregularities, unlawful activities, and manipulation of election records, including the destruction of evidence and fraud.
Georgia, it is a fraud to conceal a fraud. Georgia's 2020 election, called by a margin of just 11,679 votes for Joe Biden, is marred by a series of alarming discrepancies and allegations. This examination delves into these claims in Fulton County and their possible implications on the election outcome. Ballot record and count discrepancies. In Fulton County, there is no digital record of all in-person votes cast in the original result, and the ballot images from Election Day were destroyed. The vote in Georgia underwent 3 counts: the original machine count, a statewide hand count, and a second machine count, with each producing different results, raising serious concerns about the accuracy and consistency of these counts. Alleged fraudulent president-only ballots. There are claims of thousands of president-only ballots favoring Joe Biden being injected into the second machine count. This significant influx of ballots skewed the results, challenging the integrity of Georgia's original election results. The presence of these ballots and their disproportionate favoring of one candidate suggest potential election manipulation. Vote addition, missing images, and electronic votes. The second machine count was over 17,000 votes short, yet the state recertified the result without addressing the vote deficiency. This count included 20,977 unsubstantiated votes of unknown origin, 17,852 missing ballot images, and 3,125 duplicate ballot images counted twice. Furthermore, 2,871 ballots were counted multiple times, contributing to 6,018 questionable votes. Absentee ballot issues and electronic manipulation. Approximately 90% of the 148,000 absentee ballots in Fulton County cannot be authenticated, with a significant number lacking the necessary .SHA files. Additionally, 104,994 image files of these mail-in ballots showed identical, modified timestamps, indicating potential electronic manipulation. This raises doubts about the legitimacy of a substantial portion of the absentee ballots. Early voting and absentee ballot concerns. Fulton County's early voting process revealed significant issues. None of the 315,000 votes cast in early voting were witnessed and signed by the poll manager and 2 poll workers, as required by state rules. Moreover, many of these votes recorded improbably low percentages for President Trump, with figures as low as 0.9%, 2.4%, and 3.7%, suggesting he was a third-party candidate. Ballot trafficking and voter registration issues. A massive ballot trafficking operation was uncovered by True the Vote in Georgia. This operation involved 242 traffickers who made 5,662 ballot drops in drop boxes, with a significant portion of these drops occurring during non-voting hours, midnight to 5 a.m. Additionally, there were 364,000 ineligible voter registrations and 67,284 votes cast from voters with invalid residency, manipulation of voter rolls, and fraudulent addresses. There were 1,500 voter IDs credited for voting in 2020, but not on any voter rolls from that year, suggesting post-election manipulation of voter rolls. Furthermore, some absentee ballots were issued to non-existent locations, such as Bangkok, Thailand, Georgia, and Denver, Georgia, casting doubts on the legitimacy of these votes. Chain of custody violations and missing audit sheets. In DeKalb County, 43,907 Dropbox ballots violated chain of custody rules. Additionally, 59,000 of the 79,406 Dropbox ballots were not immediately transported to the election registrar, violating state election board rules. Tally sheets were missing from the hand audit and remained unaccounted for, further complicating the integrity of the election's results. Concerns with electronic voting systems. Concerns were raised about potential vulnerabilities in the electronic voting system. Reports suggested that election-changing malware could be inserted into Dominion machines via external USB ports. Additionally, QR code mismatch errors were found in system logs of tabulators used in the 2020, 2021, and 2022 elections in 65 out of 67 Georgia counties, indicating systematic issues with vote counting. Unusual voting patterns. On Election Day, Fulton County certified 59,143 in-person votes despite records indicating only 14,152 people had voted by 5 p.m. This discrepancy suggests an inflated vote total by approximately 37,000 votes, raising serious questions about the accuracy of the in-person vote count, as records showed no significant increase in voters during the final 2 hours of voting. Disproportionate absentee ballot orders. Fulton County ordered over 1 million absentee ballots before the 2020 election, a number exceeding the county's total of 808,680 registered voters as of November 1, 2020. This over-ordering of ballots, particularly after a majority of mail-in ballot requests had already been sent to voters by Runbeck Election Services, raises concerns about the potential for ballot misuse or mismanagement. Concerns over ballot trafficking. The ballot trafficking operation discovered by True the Vote involved 242 traffickers in Georgia, making 5,662 ballot drops in drop boxes, with an average of 23 runs per trafficker. Notably, 40% of these illicit drops, captured on camera, occurred during non-voting hours, midnight to 5 a.m., pointing to coordinated efforts outside standard electoral processes. Discrepancies in voter registration. There were 364,000 ineligible voter registrations in Georgia, and 67,284 votes were cast from voters with invalid residency. Additionally, 1,500 voter IDs that received credit for voting in 2020 were not on any voter rolls from that year, appearing for the first time on the November 4, 2021 election rolls, suggesting irregularities in voter registration management. Questionable absentee voting practices. Some absentee ballots were issued to questionable addresses, including Bangkok, Thailand, Georgia, Denver, Georgia, Los Angeles, Georgia, and other implausible locations. Votes cast from such addresses in 2020, like those listed as Bronx, Georgia, Hilton Head, Georgia, and Louisville, Georgia, indicate potential fraudulence in absentee ballot issuance and casting, chain of custody and rule violations. In Fulton County, early voting procedures exhibited significant breaches. Seals were broken, and memory cards were reprogrammed and inserted into different scanners to count absentee ballots, violating election rules. These actions compromised the security and integrity of the voting process, raising doubts about the validity of the ballots counted. Cybersecurity and voting system. Concerns. Concerns about vulnerabilities in Georgia's electronic voting systems were highlighted by cybersecurity experts. Professor J. Alex Halderman's report detailed how external USB ports on Dominion machines could be exploited to insert election-changing malware. This potential vulnerability casts a shadow over the security and reliability of the electronic voting infrastructure used. Delayed reconciliation process. Fulton County officials admitted to significant delays in the post-election reconciliation process. They did not engage in reconciliation until weeks after Election Day, a critical lapse that could affect the accuracy of the final vote tally. This delay in reconciling voter numbers with ballot counts is a fundamental oversight in election integrity. Questions about election result reliability. The 2022 election results in Georgia were mired in controversy, with allegations of unreliability and electronic alterations. The post-election reconciliation conducted after the margins needed to win were clear, further adds to the concerns about the credibility and authenticity of the election outcomes. Inflated in-person vote totals. Fulton County's elections director, Richard Barron, acknowledged in a 2021 board meeting the delay in starting the reconciliation process, usually a couple of days before certification. This delay was attributed to waiting for reports from NOINC, indicating a lack of timely verification of voters and ballots. Such delays in essential election processes could significantly impact the integrity of the election results. Excessive absentee ballot ordering. In an alarming discovery, it was found that 235,000 absentee ballots were requested and accepted too early, 180 days before the 2020 election, contrary to Georgia's election laws. This premature acceptance of absentee ballots, dating back to May 6, 2020, raises serious questions about the adherence to legal voting procedures. Invalid voter registrations and votes. Philip Stark, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and an inventor of risk-limiting audits, observed that the electronic records of the election were intact. However, the lack of basic accounting controls in Fulton County, as stated by Stark, makes it impossible to determine the true winner, highlighting concerns over the integrity of the electronic voting records. Suspicious absentee ballot addresses. Fulton County's order of over 1 million absentee ballots before the 2020 election raises eyebrows, as this number surpasses the total active voters in the county, which stood at 808,680 as of November 1, 2020. This over-ordering, especially after most ballot requests had already been fulfilled, points to potential mismanagement or misuse of absentee ballots. Total votes in question versus Biden's victory margin. In summing up the various concerns and discrepancies presented, the total number of votes in question for the Georgia election ranges considerably. The lower estimate stands at approximately 184,275 votes, while the higher estimate, factoring in the maximum potential from the ballot trafficking allegation, reaches approximately 246,945 votes. When juxtaposed with Joe Biden's victory margin of 11,779 votes in Georgia, the scale of these potential irregularities and discrepancies becomes starkly evident. The sheer volume of votes in question not only far exceeds the official margin of victory, but also casts significant doubt on the credibility and integrity of the election outcome. This substantial disparity underscores the pressing need for a thorough and transparent investigation into these claims to ensure the integrity of the electoral process and to uphold the foundational principles of democratic elections. Wisconsin. Examining Wisconsin's 2020 election. As we delve into Wisconsin's 2020 election results, a contest decided by a mere 20,682 votes, a tapestry of legal, procedural, and administrative controversies emerges. This in-depth analysis seeks to unravel the complexities and scrutinize the numerous issues raised. All law has either been derived from the consent of the people, established by necessity, confirmed by custom, or of divine providence. This fundamental principle underpins our exploration of Wisconsin's electoral process, where the legitimacy and legality of certain practices have come under intense scrutiny. Wisconsin's election margin, a close call. In the 2020 presidential election, Wisconsin was called for Joe Biden by a margin of 20,682 votes. This narrow victory margin has become a focal point for numerous questions and challenges. It sets the stage for a deeper investigation into various aspects of the election process. The slim lead underscores the significance of each allegation of irregularity, as even small discrepancies could have a substantial impact on the overall election outcome in a state where the vote difference was so slight. Supreme Court ruling on drop boxes. In a critical ruling issued in July 2022, the Wisconsin Supreme Court determined, with a 4-3 decision, that the use of drop boxes for voting is illegal. This ruling casts a retrospective shadow over the 2020 elections, wherein drop boxes were extensively used, of 528 drop boxes for the general election. These boxes played a significant role in the collection of 1,996,174 absentee ballot votes, including 1,146,731 votes cast by mail and 643,236 in person. The Supreme Court's ruling, therefore, brings into question the legal standing of these votes, potentially impacting the integrity and legitimacy of the election results. Megan Wolf's decision on ballot drop boxes. The decision to use ballot drop boxes in Wisconsin's 2020 elections, a key factor in the controversy, was initiated by Megan Wolf, Wisconsin's election commissioner. Wolf declared unilaterally that ballot drop boxes could be utilized for voting, bypassing a formal vote by the Wisconsin Election Commission's wiki commissioners. This significant move, not subjected to the usual procedural checks and balances, introduced a method of voting that later came under legal scrutiny. Wolf's encouragement to clerks for deploying drop boxes, coupled with her suggestion that these could be unstaffed, played a substantial role in how the general election was conducted. Justice Rebecca Bradley on election law. Justice Rebecca Bradley of the Wisconsin Supreme Court provided a critical perspective on the state's election process in her writings. She emphasized that the right to vote must be upheld within the bounds of law, stating that throughout history, tyrants have claimed electoral victories via elections conducted in violation of governing law. Bradley asserted that Wisconsin elected officials derive their power from the consent of the governed, and if elections are conducted outside the law, that consent is not conferred, rendering such elections unlawful and their results illegitimate. She highlighted that thousands of votes cast via unlawful methods, such as the unstaffed drop boxes, directly harm Wisconsin voters. Bradley's analysis concluded that the illegality of these drop boxes weakened the people's faith in the election, reflecting their will, and injured all lawful voters when election institutions fail to follow the law, leaving the results in question. She noted that unlawful votes not only dilute lawful votes, but pollute them, thereby degrading the integrity of the electoral outcomes. Dropbox, surveillance, and accountability. In Milwaukee, the implementation of drop boxes for the 2020 election raised serious concerns about surveillance and accountability. Despite claims by election officials that these drop boxes would be under 24-hour surveillance, responses to open record requests told a different story. Requests for video surveillance footage of these drop boxes were met with responses such as, "No record exists for your request," "No video from requested time frame," "No such record exists," and "No security camera." This lack of surveillance footage, contradicting earlier assurances, has led to significant doubts about the security and integrity of the drop boxes. Ballot trafficking in Milwaukee County. The issue of ballot trafficking in Milwaukee County during the 2020 election has raised significant concerns about the integrity of the voting process. An investigation conducted by True the Vote identified 107 individuals engaged in ballot trafficking activities in the county. These individuals were reportedly involved in a substantial number of trips to drop boxes, totaling 2,824 visits, with each trafficker making an average of 26 visits. Remarkably, some traffickers were recorded making as many as 15 drops in a single day. The majority of these Dropbox visits occurred after 8 p.m., which is unusual and raises suspicions about the legitimacy of the ballots being deposited. Additionally, these traffickers were observed making multiple visits to non-governmental organizations, NGOs, between their trips to drop boxes. The pattern and frequency of these activities suggest a coordinated effort that could potentially influence the election outcome, especially in light of the narrow victory margin in Wisconsin. Rise of indefinitely confined voters. The 2020 election in Wisconsin saw a remarkable surge in the number of voters classified as indefinitely confined. This status, typically reserved for those physically unable to visit polling places due to age, illness, or disability, experienced a dramatic increase across the state. In Dane County, the number of indefinitely confined voters rose by 393% from 2016 to 2020, while Racine County saw an increase of 492%. Milwaukee County experienced a 281% rise, contributing to an overall state increase of 287%. The total number of indefinitely confined voters in 2020 reached 220,404, a significant jump from just around 70,000 in 2019 and only 56,978 in 2016. Notably, 77% of these voters in 2020 had never been listed as indefinitely confined before. The Wisconsin Legislative Audit Bureau found that 48,554 people who voted under this status in November 2020 either had not provided a photo ID or did not have one on file, bypassing the usual ID requirements. The surge in indefinitely confined voters was partly due to guidance from Democrat election clerks who advised voters to identify themselves as disabled during the COVID-19 pandemic to avoid voter ID laws. This advice, deemed illegal after the election, contributed to a spike in indefinitely confined voters. Scott McDonald, the Democrat clerk of Dane County, explicitly encouraged residents to declare themselves indefinitely confined, a move seen as an attempt to sidestep voter ID requirements. His previous criticisms of Wisconsin's voter ID law and calls to avoid it further highlight the contentious nature of this issue. The Wisconsin Supreme Court later ruled in December 2020 that the pandemic did not render all Wisconsin electors indefinitely confined, thereby invalidating this interpretation and its use to bypass photo ID requirements. Nursing home voting and alleged fraud. The 2020 election in Wisconsin also brought to light serious allegations of voting fraud in nursing homes. The Wisconsin Election Commission's decision to order nursing homes to violate the law by not allowing special voting deputies, SVDs, led to significant irregularities. Investigations, particularly in Racine County, uncovered cases where elderly residents, some incapacitated, allegedly had votes cast in their names without their consent. The Racine County Sheriff found that these practices shattered state election laws, identifying at least 8 cases of felony voter fraud in one nursing home alone, which accounted for nearly 1 in 5 of the facility's residents. These findings pointed to a broader pattern of exploitation and manipulation of elderly voters, raising profound concerns about the integrity of the voting process in these facilities. The admission by the Wisconsin Election Commission of essentially instructing clerks to break the law further underscores the severity of these allegations. Findings of Special Counsel Michael J. Gableman. Special Counsel Michael J. Gableman conducted a thorough investigation into Wisconsin's 2020 election, revealing numerous concerns and potential legal violations. Gableman's investigation particularly highlighted the Democracy in the Park events in Madison, which involved various possible legal breaches. These events were used to collect mail-in ballots and were subject to numerous complaints regarding their legality. Gableman raised questions about the validity of over 17,000 absentee ballots collected at these events, citing concerns over whether all workers were properly deputized, trained, sworn in, and if mandatory oath of office and documentation related to absentee ballots were handled correctly. Additionally, Gableman's report pointed out the undue influence of well-funded private groups who leverage large grants to certain Wisconsin cities, effectively co-opting the election apparatus to their benefit. His findings also noted that at least 17.5% of election clerks were not properly trained, and there were instances of exploitation of elders in nursing homes. These findings paint a picture of a potentially compromised election process where the proper legal procedures and training were not uniformly followed, leading to questions about the integrity of the election results. External influence in Green Bay's election process. The 2020 election process in Green Bay, Wisconsin, faced significant scrutiny due to the external influence exerted by the Center for Tech and Civic Life, CTCL, and its associates. Michael Spitzer Rubenstein, a former Democratic Party operative, assumed an unusually influential role in Green Bay's election management. Described as a de facto election administrator, he had unprecedented access to absentee ballots days before the election. This access extended to managing the transportation of ballots and even instructing the counting of late-arriving ballots at the central count location. Furthermore, internal emails revealed that Spitzer Rubenstein was deeply involved in all aspects of managing the election officials and was trusted with the only set of physical keys to the city's central count location. The CTCL grant facilitated this involvement, raising concerns about the impartiality and integrity of the election process in Green Bay. The extent of Spitzer Rubenstein's involvement, particularly in critical tasks usually reserved for election officials, has led to questions about the undue external influence on the city's election procedures and the potential impact on the election outcomes. Conclusion: implications for Wisconsin's election integrity. The numerous issues and irregularities identified in Wisconsin's 2020 election have significant implications for the state's election integrity. Key among these concerns are the use of now-declared illegal drop boxes, the surge in indefinitely confined voters, allegations of ballot trafficking in Milwaukee, and the external influence exerted in the election processes of major cities like Green Bay. Together, these issues put a substantial number of votes in question. Surge in indefinitely confined voters, 220,404 votes. Ballot trafficking allegations, potential impact on thousands of votes. Irregularities in voter registration and ID compliance, 48,554 votes without proper ID verification. When combined, these issues potentially affect hundreds of thousands of votes, a significant number in comparison to the narrow victory margin of just 20,682 votes by which Joe Biden won the state. This stark contrast between the number of votes in question and the margin of victory highlights the potential for these irregularities to have influenced the election outcome. It underscores the necessity for a thorough and transparent examination of these concerns to ensure the integrity of Wisconsin's electoral system and to reaffirm public trust in the democratic process. Wrong is wiped out by reconciliation. This adage echoes through the contentious aftermath of Pennsylvania's 2020 presidential election, which was called for Joe Biden by a margin of
80,555
votes. However, beneath the surface of this result lies a complex web of discrepancies and questions that challenge the integrity of the election. Months after the ballots were cast, the Pennsylvania Department of State reported a concerning anomaly.
121,240 more votes were recorded than registered voters.
A stark contradiction to the legal stipulations required for certifying an election. This introduction delves into the multifaceted issues that have surfaced in Pennsylvania's election process. From significant voter mismatches to allegations of irregularities in mail-in ballot counting and the impact of external funding on election administration, each aspect merits close examination. The aim is to unravel these complexities, assess their potential impact on the electoral outcome, and explore what these discrepancies mean for the integrity of Pennsylvania's democratic process. State Representative Frank Ryan's vote discrepancy findings. Amidst the post-election scrutiny in Pennsylvania, State Representative Frank Ryan, a certified public accountant, played a pivotal role in tracking vote discrepancies. Ryan initially reported a staggering discrepancy:
170,830 more votes than voters in the presidential race,
more than double the margin by which Pennsylvania was called. His findings cast a significant shadow over the alleged certification of Pennsylvania's presidential election results, suggesting a deep mismatch in the vote tally. Ryan's statement, "These numbers just don't add up," and the alleged certification of Pennsylvania's presidential election results was absolutely premature, unconfirmed, and in error. The magnitude of the discrepancy reported by Ryan, if accurate, not only questions the validity of the election outcome, but also suggests fundamental flaws in Pennsylvania's electoral system. Department of State's response to vote discrepancies. In response to the alarming discrepancies reported in the Pennsylvania election, the Department of State labeled the findings as obvious misinformation. However, they acknowledged that the only way to accurately determine the number of voters who voted in November from the SURE, statewide uniform registry of electors, system is through the vote histories, which had not been completed by several counties, including Pennsylvania and Allegheny. Despite this admission, the election was certified on November 24, 2020, without ensuring the number of voters and votes matched in the SURE system. This certification, done before the completion of vote history uploads, raises serious questions about the procedural integrity of the election. The Department of State's statement on December 29, 2020, almost a month after the certification, added to the controversy, especially since the final reconciliation of votes and voters in the SURE system was not completed until February 2021. This delay and the subsequent discrepancies highlight potential gaps in the election management and certification process in Pennsylvania. Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar's resignation timing. The timing of Pennsylvania Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar's resignation on February 1, 2021, coincided with significant developments in the state's election results reconciliation. Her resignation came at a critical juncture when the SURE system finally completed uploading voter histories and closed the election, revealing ongoing discrepancies in the vote count. Notably,
7,944
ballots were accepted that could not be associated with a registered voter. This resignation, occurring amidst unresolved issues in the election process, including the significant discrepancy of over
120,000 votes without corresponding voters in the SURE system,
casts a shadow on the election certification process. Boockvar's departure amid these controversies and the subsequent acknowledgement of discrepancies in the vote count raises questions about the transparency and accountability of the election administration in Pennsylvania. Late mail-in ballot counting and discrepancies. A critical aspect of Pennsylvania's 2020 election controversy involves the counting of late mail-in ballots. According to official data, Pennsylvania recorded
71,893 people
who returned mail-in ballots after the election date, including significant numbers received between November 4 and November 12. Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar had previously claimed that only 10,000 ballots were received between the close of polls on Election Day and November 6, a figure starkly contrasted by the actual numbers reported. The Department of State's data indicated that
7,035,746
ballots were cast in the presidential election, including write-in votes, overvotes, and undervotes. However, after all counties closed the election in the SURE system,
6,914,556 voters
were credited with participation, revealing a voter deficit of 121,240. The acceptance of ballots received post-election and the subsequent discrepancies in the voter count highlight issues of compliance with electoral deadlines and the accuracy of the vote tallying process. These factors contribute to the larger narrative of uncertainties and potential irregularities in Pennsylvania's election administration. Allegations of unlawful counting and poll watcher exclusion. The 2020 election was marred by allegations of unlawful counting practices and the exclusion of Republican poll watchers. Reports emerged of hundreds of thousands of mail-in ballots being counted in secret and in defiance of court orders. In particular, incidents were reported where Republican poll watchers were allegedly thrown out of buildings where vote counting was taking place, raising serious concerns about the transparency and fairness of the counting process. These allegations suggest not only potential violations of election law, but also raise questions about the integrity of the vote count. The exclusion of poll watchers who play a crucial role in ensuring a fair and transparent electoral process potentially compromises the legitimacy of the election outcomes, especially in a state with a tight victory margin as seen in Pennsylvania. U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain's stand-down order.
In a significant revelation, U.S. Attorney Bill McSwain reported that he was instructed to stand down and not investigate allegations of election irregularities in Pennsylvania. This directive reportedly came from Attorney General Bill Barr. McSwain stated that he was advised not to discuss the voter fraud allegations he received and to pass any serious investigations along to the then Attorney General of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, a Democrat. This instruction is particularly notable considering Shapiro had publicly declared before the election that Trump is going to lose. The stand-down order to McSwain and the direction to defer serious investigations to a state official who had expressed a predetermined outcome has raised questions about the impartiality and thoroughness of the investigation into the election irregularities in Pennsylvania. Mark Zuckerberg's financial influence in Pennsylvania's election. The 2020 election in Pennsylvania was notably influenced by substantial financial contributions from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg. More than $25 million was funneled into the administration of the election, with a significant portion of this funding directed to Democrat-controlled jurisdictions within the state. Evidence of election. Evidence destruction in Delaware County, a lawsuit filed in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, brought to light video evidence of an election official discussing the destruction of election evidence from the 2020 election. The video captured officials talking about the need to get rid of voting pads and second scanners, with one official noting, "It's a felony." This revelation has led to allegations that Delaware County officials engaged in unlawful practices, potentially violating election laws. The alleged destruction of records, as claimed by sources involved in the litigation, is suspected to have been carried out to ensure that the records provided matched the reported election results from November 2020. Ballot trafficking concerns. In Pennsylvania, the 2020 election raised significant concerns about ballot trafficking, particularly highlighted by an investigation that identified 1,155 individuals engaged in suspicious ballot drop-box activities. These individuals, referred to as ballot mules, were each documented visiting at least 10 drop boxes and multiple non-governmental organizations, NGOs, with some making hundreds of trips. This pattern of behavior, especially the frequency and timing of visits to drop boxes, has led to allegations of organized ballot trafficking. The investigation's findings suggest a coordinated effort to influence the election outcome, a serious allegation in a state where the presidential race was decided by a relatively narrow margin of 80,555 votes. Implications for Pennsylvania's electoral integrity. The myriad of concerns and irregularities surrounding Pennsylvania's 2020 election, from the discrepancies between votes and voters, allegations of unlawful counting practices, the influence of substantial external funding, to potential ballot trafficking, collectively cast doubt on the integrity of the state's election results. Particularly, the revelation of 121,240 more votes than voters raises questions about the impartiality and fairness of the electoral process. The alleged destruction of election evidence in Delaware County and the findings of widespread ballot trafficking activities further exacerbate these concerns. Given the narrow victory margin of 80,555 votes in a crucial battleground state, the cumulative impact of these issues is substantial, calling into question whether the reported outcomes truly reflect the will of Pennsylvania voters.
Analyzing Arizona's contested 2020 election. That which was originally void does not by lapse of time become valid. This principle resonates in the backdrop of Arizona's closely contested 2020 presidential election. The state, called for Joe Biden by a margin of only 10,457 votes, faced a flurry of post-election controversies and allegations that have cast doubts over the election's integrity. Central to these disputes is Maricopa County, where key issues such as the acceptance of 20,500 mail-in ballots after Election Day, 18,000 more than the entire election margin, have raised significant concerns. The legal stipulation that ballots must be received no later than 7 p.m. on Election Day, which was November 3, 2020, further complicates the legitimacy of these late-arriving ballots. This introduction sets the stage for a comprehensive examination of the various allegations and irregularities reported in Arizona, from vote and voter discrepancies, signature verification problems, to concerns about the chain of custody and potential algorithmic manipulations in vote counting. The aim is to unravel these complexities and assess their potential impact on the state's election outcome and the broader implications for electoral integrity. Maricopa County's late mail-in ballot acceptance. In the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election, a critical issue emerged in Maricopa County, Arizona, where the acceptance of mail-in ballots after Election Day raised significant legal and procedural questions. Maricopa County accepted approximately 20,500 mail-in ballots after the Election Day, a figure that includes 18,000 ballots received on November 4th from the United States Postal Service. This number is particularly striking as it exceeds the entire election margin by which Arizona was called. According to Arizona law, ballots must be received no later than 7 p.m. on Election Day, November 3rd, making the acceptance of these ballots potentially unlawful. The issue is further compounded by the statement from Verify Vote claiming that 20,000 ballots recorded as incoming from USPS on and after November 4th were of sufficient quantity to change the results of the 2020 election in Arizona. The implications of this late acceptance are profound, given the close vote margin, and raise questions about the adherence to election laws and the overall integrity of the election process in Maricopa County. These records, which were withheld from public records requests for nearly 7 months, showed that 18,000 ballots were received on November 4th, 1,000 on November 5th, and 1,500 on November 6th. The late arrival of these ballots, especially in such a significant number, directly contradicts Arizona's election law, which requires ballots to be received by 7 p.m. on Election Day, November 3rd. This information casts doubt on the certification process and raises critical questions about the validity of the reported election results in Arizona. Signature verification issues in Maricopa County. A significant concern in Maricopa County, Arizona during the 2020 election revolved around the process of signature verification for mail-in ballots. An analysis by the We the People Arizona Alliance presented to the state legislature highlighted that 420,987 ballots failed to meet signature verification standards. The initial analysis of 380,976 ballots identified 181,378 that should not have been counted due to verification issues, which is nearly half of all reviewed ballots. This includes discrepancies such as 1,870 blank envelopes, 554 envelopes with signatures differing from the voters, 2,104 scribbles, 128 instances of duplicate voter processing, and several other categories of signature-related irregularities. The We the People Arizona Alliance's analysis revealed additional discrepancies. 480,117 instances of signatures with unreasonable differences from control signatures, 1,875 cases where the signature did not match until after the election, 36,034 control signatures that did not match the voters, 4,433 unusable control signatures, 47,366 failures to meet Secretary of State standards, and 38,990 egregious signature mismatches. This extensive array of mismatches and irregularities casts serious doubts on the integrity of the mail-in voting process in Maricopa County. Furthermore, it was found that for certain voters in Maricopa County, ballot envelope signatures that did not initially match on Election Day were later altered to show a match. Specifically, 1,875 ballot envelopes with non-matching signatures were subsequently updated with matching signatures on key dates after the election: January 28th, February 3rd, and February 8th, 2020. Notably, 783 of these signatures were digitally inserted on February 3rd alone. This retroactive alteration of signature records raises serious integrity concerns, particularly given the close margin of the election in Arizona. The adjustment of signatures post-election calls into question the authenticity and legitimacy of these votes and the overall integrity of the mail-in ballot verification process. Such actions, if confirmed, could indicate a systematic approach to reconciling discrepancies that could potentially affect the election outcome. These findings highlight a significant breakdown in the signature verification process, raising serious questions about the integrity of a large portion of the mail-in ballots in Maricopa County, and, by extension, the overall reliability of Arizona's 2020 election results. Chain of custody concerns for mail-in ballots and issues with ballot transport forms. One of the significant issues in Arizona's 2020 election, particularly in Maricopa County, was the absence of a documented chain of custody for a large number of ballots. The lack of chain of custody documentation for approximately 740,000 ballots raises serious concerns about the security and integrity of these votes. Additionally, of the 923 early vote ballots accepted at vote centers or drop boxes, only 183,406 ballots were accounted for on ballot transport forms. This leaves more than 80% of ballot transport forms without proper ballot counts, a significant oversight in the election process. Furthermore, of the 1,895 early vote ballot transfer forms, 48 lacked the required 2 witness signatures attesting to the transfer of ballots, with some forms having no witness signatures at all. This lack of proper witness signatures and incomplete transport forms further compromises the credibility of the ballot transfer process. The Election Assistance Commission underscores the importance of maintaining a proper chain of custody, stating it is essential to fostering trust in the democratic process. The absence of accurate and complete documentation undermines the transparency and reliability of the ballot handling process. The substantial gap in chain of custody documentation in Maricopa County, coupled with the incomplete and improperly witnessed ballot transport forms, raises serious concerns about the security and transparency of the ballot transfer process. These issues pose a significant challenge to verifying the legitimacy of a large portion of the ballots cast in the 2020 election, casting doubt on the integrity of the ballots transported and, by extension, the overall election results in Maricopa County. Compounding these issues, the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors admitted to purging election data and moving it after they received a subpoena. This action, which was acknowledged during their testimony before the United States House of Representatives, has critical implications for the transparency and accountability of the election administration in Maricopa County. The decision to purge and relocate crucial election data, especially in the context of a legal subpoena and an ongoing audit, casts a shadow over the veracity and completeness of the audit findings. It raises questions about the motives and actions of the Maricopa County election officials and their commitment to maintaining a transparent and accountable election process. The removal of these data could potentially hinder efforts to fully understand and address the various concerns and irregularities raised in the aftermath of the 2020 election, over 100% mail-in ballot turnout, and anomalies in Pima County. In Pima County, Arizona, during the 2020 election, there were extraordinary instances of mail-in ballot turnout, surpassing 100% in some precincts, a highly unusual and questionable occurrence. 2 precincts reported turnout rates exceeding 100% for mail-in ballots, with one precinct showing a 99.5% turnout, counting 9,812 ballots, and another with a 100.6% turnout, returning 2,182 ballots, despite only 2,170 mailings sent. These statistics alone account for 11,994 ballots, exceeding the state's election margin and potentially altering the presidential election outcome. Additionally, 260,000 votes in Pima County precincts had an over 92% turnout from mail-in ballots, significantly higher than the national mail-in ballot rate of 71%. The abnormal high turnout rates in these precincts, especially when compared to the statewide and national averages, raise substantial concerns about the validity of these votes and the integrity of the mail-in voting process in Pima County. The 2020 election in Pima County also exhibited notable anomalies in mail-in ballot return rates, particularly in precincts with exceptionally high turnout. The return rate in these precincts was significantly higher than the national average and even the combined average of all other counties in Arizona. For instance, one precinct reported an astonishing 99.5% mail-in ballot turnout, while another precinct showed a 100.6% turnout, with more ballots returned than were initially mailed out. These anomalies are not only statistically improbable, but also cast doubt on the authenticity of the mail-in ballot process in Pima County. Additionally, the analysis of voting patterns revealed a significant shift in party preference among Republican voters for Biden, which was inconsistent with typical voting behaviors. Such discrepancies in mail-in ballot return rates and voting patterns raise serious questions about the integrity of the election process in Pima County and the validity of the votes counted. Ballot trafficking and harvesting allegations in Arizona. In Maricopa County, Arizona, the 2020 election was marred by allegations of ballot trafficking, raising significant concerns for election integrity. The election integrity group True the Vote identified more than 202 individuals engaged in ballot trafficking activities who collectively made 4,282 individual drop box visits during the election. This pattern of repeated and frequent visits to drop boxes by a relatively small number of individuals suggests a coordinated effort to collect and deposit a large number of ballots. This activity, often referred to as ballot harvesting, is a contentious issue with potential implications for the security and legitimacy of the votes cast. The scale of the alleged ballot trafficking in Maricopa County, especially given the close margin of the presidential election in Arizona, underscores the need for a comprehensive investigation to determine the extent of these activities and their impact on the election results. In Yuma County, Arizona, during the 2020 primary election, there was a notable case of ballot harvesting that led to legal consequences. Two individuals were charged and pled guilty to ballot harvesting, an illegal practice where individuals collect and submit ballots on behalf of others. This case highlights the vulnerabilities in the mail-in voting system and the potential for abuse. Ballot harvesting, especially when done on a large scale or in a coordinated manner, can undermine the integrity of the election process by allowing undue influence over voters and their ballots. The guilty pleas in this case serve as a reminder of the importance of strict enforcement of election laws to ensure fair and free elections. The implications of such practices are particularly relevant in the context of the closely contested 2020 general election in Arizona, raising concerns about the broader integrity of the mail-in voting process. Alleged algorithmic manipulation in vote counting. A significant allegation in Arizona's 2020 election pertains to the potential use of algorithmic manipulation in the vote counting process, particularly in Pima and Maricopa counties. A computer scientist testified that an algorithm similar to those used in cruise control systems or self-driving cars appeared to be affecting early votes in these counties, with the capability to maintain a predetermined set point outcome despite external disturbances. This type of algorithmic manipulation, if present, suggests a systematic approach to influence election results. Walter C. Daugherty, a senior lecturer emeritus in computer science and engineering at Texas A&M University, conducted an expert analysis of the vote patterns in Maricopa and Pima counties. His analysis revealed a consistent and systematic decline in the cumulative ratio of Biden to Trump votes in the cast vote records before Election Day. Notably, this pattern persisted across early mail-in and in-person votes, with ratios declining from over 300% to 157% by Election Day in Pima Pima County. Doherty's findings suggest that such a uniform and predictable pattern is statistically improbable to occur naturally without some form of artificial manipulation. Doherty's analysis indicated patterns suggestive of ballots being processed through a tabulator tracking a proportional integral derivative (PID) type of control function in a closed-loop feedback system. He found a significant and systematic decline in the cumulative ratio as counting progresses in early mail-in and in-person votes, pointing to the possibility of artificial manipulation in the vote tabulation process. Crucially, Doherty emphasized that this pattern cannot be simply attributed to the commonly cited factor of Democrats voting earlier than Republicans. The data's lack of independence and the pattern's uniformity across different voting blocks raise profound questions about the integrity of the vote counting process, casting doubt on the authenticity and reliability of the reported results in these key Arizona counties. Conclusion: implications for Arizona's election integrity. Arizona's 2020 presidential election, marked by a razor-thin margin of 10,457 votes, is clouded by numerous issues and irregularities that potentially shift this narrow outcome. The late acceptance of approximately 20,500 mail-in ballots in Maricopa County, which included 18,000 more ballots than the total election margin, is a critical factor. These late-arriving ballots, in violation of state election law, could alone change the election results if found to be invalid. Furthermore, Walter C. Doherty's analysis indicating potential algorithmic manipulation in vote counting suggests an artificial influence over a significant portion of votes. When considering the expert's analysis of systematic signature discrepancies, where approximately 181,378 ballots were identified as problematic, the scale of potential impact becomes even more pronounced. This number is substantially higher than the victory margin, indicating that if these ballots were incorrectly counted, they could decisively alter the election outcome. Additionally, the lack of chain of custody documentation for 740,000 ballots and the issues with ballot transport forms further exacerbate the concerns over the election's legitimacy. In conclusion, the cumulative effect of these discrepancies and irregularities in Arizona's 2020 election not only challenges the reported outcomes, but also raises fundamental questions about the election's integrity. Addressing these concerns is crucial for ensuring that future elections are conducted in a manner that upholds the principles of transparency, accuracy, and fairness, essential for maintaining public trust in Arizona's electoral system.
Examining Michigan's 2020 election results. No one needs to be punished for the crime or wrong of another. This principle sets the tone for scrutinizing Michigan's 2020 presidential election, which was called for Joe Biden by a margin of 154,188 votes. Despite this clear margin, the election's integrity has been questioned due to various irregularities and discrepancies. Intimidation and threats in Wayne County Board of Canvassers. In Wayne County, a critical area in Michigan's 2020 election, allegations of intimidation and threats surfaced during the certification process. Monica Palmer, then chair of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, cited discrepancies in Detroit's mail-in ballot counts as a reason for initially voting against certifying the election results. She reported experiencing bullying and threats to her safety following her vote, highlighting a concerning aspect of the election process. The situation escalated when a Michigan state representative-elect publicly criticized Palmer's decision and disclosed personal information about her children's school, adding to the intimidation. This incident in Wayne County reflects the intense pressure and hostile environment surrounding the election certification process. It raises serious concerns about the ability of election officials to perform their duties without undue influence or fear, which is essential for maintaining the integrity and fairness of the electoral process. Illegal ballot counting practices in Detroit. In Detroit, a key city in Michigan's 2020 election, there were several allegations of illegal ballot counting practices. Reports and affidavits suggest that officials in Detroit blocked Republican poll watchers' access, covered windows, called the police, and denied lawful challenges, all to count ballots in secret. This lack of transparency in the ballot counting process, particularly in covering windows and restricting poll watcher access, directly contradicts election laws designed to ensure fair and open procedures. These actions in the TCF Center, Detroit's central counting facility, have led to serious allegations of misconduct and have cast doubt on the legitimacy of the ballot counting process in one of Michigan's most populous cities. In a significant development during Michigan's 2020 election, affidavits and video evidence revealed that thousands of ballots were unexpectedly delivered through a back door of the TCF Center in Detroit at around 3:30 a.m. on election night. This occurrence raised suspicions due to the timing and manner of the delivery, with no clear chain of custody for these ballots. The Michigan State Senate Oversight Committee, in a report attempting to address concerns of fraud, confirmed that a large volume of ballots was indeed delivered to the TCF Center without a proper chain of custody, a critical issue in maintaining election integrity. This unexplained influx of ballots in the middle of the night, particularly in a closely contested state like Michigan, has fueled concerns and theories about potential ballot tampering or irregularities in the vote counting process. Understanding the source, legitimacy, and impact of these late-night ballot deliveries remains a key point of inquiry in assessing the fairness and accuracy of Michigan's election results. Issues with unrequested absentee ballots. A significant concern raised in the Michigan State Senate Oversight Committee's report was the identification of an estimated 289,866 absentee ballots sent to individuals who never requested them. Such a practice would be illegal according to the committee. This issue is particularly troubling as it undermines the fundamental principles of absentee voting, which require voters to request ballots to ensure their legitimacy and prevent unauthorized voting. The distribution of many unrequested absentee ballots poses a risk of fraud and could significantly impact the integrity of the election, especially in a state where the results were decided by a relatively narrow margin. Zuckerberg's financial influence in Michigan's election. Substantial financial contributions from Mark Zuckerberg through his nonprofit, the Center for Tech and Civic Life, CTCL, played a notable role. Zuckerberg's organization provided Michigan with $16,800,000, a significant sum that had the potential to influence the administration of the election. Specifically, Detroit received $7,400,000, which was used to dramatically expand the vote for Democrats. This grant financed drop boxes and facilitated the return of absentee ballots, like those that arrived at the TCF Center after midnight. The involvement of CTCL in funding these critical aspects of the election process, particularly in a battleground state, raises questions about the neutrality of these funds and their impact on the election's fairness. Allegations of ballot trafficking in Michigan. Allegations of widespread ballot trafficking, a practice that poses a significant threat to election integrity. The election integrity group, True the Vote, identified a pattern of ballot trafficking involving NGOs and ballot drop boxes in the state. Notably, there were numerous instances of ballot stuffing caught on camera in Detroit. In one incident, a woman was seen approaching a drop box and then returning to her car to sign a stack of ballots before depositing them. This behavior suggests an illicit attempt to influence the election outcome by introducing illegitimate ballots into the system. Signature verification rule changes and court rulings. A significant issue in Michigan's 2020 election was the alteration of signature verification rules for absentee ballots by Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Benson ordered election workers to presume all absentee ballots were legitimate, a directive that later faced legal challenges. A judge ruled that Benson's order was invalid, but this decision came months after the election. The impact of this directive was evident in the low rejection rate for absentee ballots due to signature issues, which stood at only 0.1%, and an even lower rate of 0.04% for mismatching signatures. Benson's repeated losses in court over issues related to the 2020 election highlight the contentious nature of these rule changes and their potential impact on the integrity of absentee voting in Michigan, particularly in a closely contested election. Voter registration fraud scheme in Muskegon County. A notable voter registration fraud scheme was uncovered in October 2020 in Muskegon County, Michigan, but remained hidden from the public for nearly 3 years after the 2020 election. A city clerk in Muskegon witnessed a woman dropping off between 8,000 and 10,000 voter registration forms at the clerk's office, many appearing fraudulent. This incident, later reported to the Muskegon Police Department, represented a staggering number of new registrations, amounting to over 20% of the city's population of 38,000 residents. An ensuing investigation confirmed that thousands of these registrations were in the same handwriting and linked to invalid or non-existent addresses. The suspect revealed she was being paid to find unregistered voters and provide them with registration forms. The organization behind this scheme, GBI Strategies, was funded by the Black PAC, which paid the firm $1,254,919 to register voters for Joe Biden in 2020. The extent of their operations was not confined to Muskegon, but believed to be active throughout Michigan and other swing states. This scheme involved paying employees to find unregistered voters, providing them with registration forms and absentee ballots. The revelation of this organized and well-funded operation raises significant concerns about the potential for systematic voter registration fraud and its impact on the integrity of the election, particularly given the narrow margin in Michigan. An investigation into GBI Strategies, responsible for a large-scale voter registration scheme, was handed over to the FBI by Michigan State Police. The delay in publicizing this investigation, which only came to light in 2023 after a Freedom of Information Act request, raises questions about the transparency and urgency of electoral investigations. Additionally, Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson faced 6 court losses related to the 2020 election, indicating ongoing legal disputes over the administration of the election. The outcome of these investigations and legal challenges could have significant implications for understanding the true nature of the 2020 election in Michigan and for shaping future electoral processes. Assessing the integrity of Michigan's 2020 election. The myriad concerns and discrepancies unearthed in Michigan's 2020 presidential election, where Joe Biden won by a margin of 154,188 votes, present a complex picture of potential electoral irregularities. The involvement of organizations like GBI Strategies in extensive voter registration activities, funded by significant contributions from external groups, raises questions about systematic efforts to influence the election outcome. The handling of absentee ballots, particularly the alteration of signature verification rules by Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, and the subsequent legal challenges, further complicates the election's legitimacy. The revelation of unrequested absentee ballots, estimated at 289,866, and the funding from Mark Zuckerberg's CTCL, particularly in Democrat-leaning areas, adds to the concerns about the fairness and transparency of the electoral process. Additionally, allegations of ballot trafficking in Michigan, with evidence of irregularities in Detroit. In conclusion, the combination of these factors, involving hundreds of thousands of votes potentially affected by various irregularities, suggests a need for a thorough investigation and review. Ensuring the integrity of the electoral system is crucial, not only for the credibility of past election results, but also for the confidence in future democratic processes in Michigan.